Major funding for Telehell is provided by Dave's Archives. At Dave's Archives, he personally transfers, archives, and preserves classic commercials from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s and shares them with you. Don't forget about his Friday night live stream on, well, guess when? Go to davesarchives.com. By RetroCirc on YouTube. RetroCirc has a whole new look and a new attitude as they bring retro commercials like never before. Always look for RetroCirc with a Q at the end. Bring your team with their team with RetroCirc, a Broadcast Plaza server partner. By Kier's Nostalgia Corner, a collection of commercial compilations, retro nostalgic things, and other random things that come to mind. Look for her on YouTube at KIERS Nostalgia Corner. And don't forget to check out her live streams early in the week. Could be Sundays, could be Mondays. Either way, they're fun days. And by the very generous benefactors who grace us on our Patreon at patreon.com/telehellpodcast, including Ed Beatty Jr., Rhonda Farrell, Rick Kalacki Jr., Chris Michaud, Meredith Morrissey, Rabbite, Spare Parts, and Neil Weinstein. Thank you.
The balloons are up 6, 5, 4, 3. Happy 1998!
I have my reasons for wanting to pick the year 1998 as our final punching bag for the season, mostly because by that point in time, I had gone from middle school graduate eager to escape that here hole, to eager young high school freshman wanting to take on the world, blissfully unaware of a pituitary time bomb ready to go off inside me at any moment.
Throbbing biological urges.
But I digress. My TV viewing habits were typical of the young teenager. Some cartoons and SNL to give me something to laugh at, some game shows to stimulate my senses and also my love of shiny things, and even some teen-themed sitcoms that snuck in morals without even realizing it much, much later, and also gawking at various female crushes of the day.
Admit it, even you still have the hots for Kelly Kapowski and Topanga from Boy Meets World, don't you?
And sure, there were some primetime shows that I watched at that point, but again, largely stuff that a young mind would get. But that was just about the extent of it. Sure, I've certainly heard of Seinfeld, but I didn't really bother to watch it until the last season aired that year.
Episode 88.
I got what the fascination was with Friends, but I didn't actually start watching it until I realized just how good the chemistry was between Courtney Cox and the late Matthew Perry.
I'm still on London time. Does that count?
Oh, that counts.
Oh, good.
And basically, I was looking for more of that. Something relatable to an adult audience member. No matter how realistic or fantastical it would be, and no matter how young and naive I still was. Considering the subjects of our next 3 shows, perhaps I was more naive than I thought in thinking I was ready for prime time, even if some of these shows clearly were not.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the greatest novelties, a fabulous boy prodigy. The most amazing of all the chimp acts that have ever come to show business. He said, as you recall, everybody remembers this one, here's an act that'll scare the life out of you. From China. He's been in India. He's been all over the world. Just back from Las Vegas, the Italian Casanova. A Texas friend of mine, my handsome Italian paisano, today's greatest living American. Here's the man I invited to Christmas dinner.
This is Telehell.
Before we can talk about the year 1998, we must first travel back 50 years earlier to 1948, and the tale of one of the most unlikeliest TV personalities of all time.
Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan.
By all accounts and purposes, and also with complete and total respect, Edward Vincent Sullivan should never have been a TV personality, and I'm all but certain that there were times when he felt the same way. After all, not counting people like, say, Siskel and Ebert or anybody who appears on a Sunday morning news program, how often does one go from being an entertainment reporter and critic for national newspapers to being the centerpiece of a TV show? And yet, that's what happened. After spending decades in various positions at newspapers on the East Coast, Sullivan became enough of a household name in print that it was only natural for him to jump to another medium. But since television wasn't mass-produced just yet, Sullivan's popularity continued to grow in the world of radio. It should be noted that Sullivan himself was not an entertainer by any means. He wasn't a comedian, a singer, a dancer, an acrobat, a juggler, or anything else that would indicate that he had a sense of showmanship. But he did write more than enough about the entertainment industry that he did have both keen eyes and ears for, at the very least, spotting talent. So much so that he was able to parlay his success as a columnist to produce and also MC various radio entertainment programs throughout the 1920s and 30s. These shows proved to be so successful that once television became more mainstream, CBS was keen on having a weekly variety show that would showcase the top talents of the day, as well as emerging talents looking to make their big break. Originally, the program would be called Toast of the Town, but the network was having a hard time looking for someone to fit in the weekly role of ringmaster. Enter a pioneering TV producer named Marlowe Lewis, who would be the co-creator of Toast of the Town, and who tried to convince CBS to bring on Sullivan as the show's master of ceremonies. But the network was a little hesitant. Sure, they knew of the popularity Sullivan's radio shows and newspaper columns had, not to mention Sullivan's knack for discovering talent. But print and audio media were both far cries from the more visual medium of television, a medium where it was easier to pick apart any given person's flaws, of which Sullivan had many just by looking at him. Many considered him too stiff, too rigid, too hunched over, devoid of emotion or anything even remotely resembling charisma, and even going so far to say that he was a man with no personality whatsoever. And for the most part, many of the critics who viewed that first season of Toast of the Town with Sullivan leading the way were proven exactly right, and continued to say the same for the 23 years that the show would run on CBS, even after the show changed its name in 1955 to The Ed Sullivan Show. But regardless of his infamously stiff demeanor, the question to ask here is a simple one. Were people who were watching The Ed Sullivan Show really watching the show strictly for the presence of Ed Sullivan? The answer is a resounding no, with conditions. His name may have been on the marquee, but the true stars of the show were those who graced the stage of the theater that currently bears his name.
And now here is Elvis Presley, the Beatles, Judy Garland, Barbara Streisand, the Muppets, the Rolling Stones, Carol Burnett, Louis Satchmo Armstrong, the Beach Boys, Sammy Davis Jr., Ella Fitzgerald, Flip Wilson, Red Skelton, Pearl Davis, Will Jordan, the Jackson Five, Jackie Gleason, James Brown, Joan Rivers, Jackie Mason, Jimmy Durante, Janis Joplin, and Topo Gigio. Oh, come on, come on. 1, 2, 3, 4.
From 1948 to 1971, The Ed Sullivan Show became the premier destination for the top talent of the day from a wide spectrum of showbiz. Not just those who were at the top of the music charts or packing comedy clubs, but the show also brought Broadway to television and made the world safe for plate spinners among the many acrobatic novelty acts they would put on the air. But like all good shows, even the legendary ones had to come to an end. In the spring of 1971, The Ed Sullivan Show became one of many shows on CBS's lineup to fall victim to what was known as the Rural Purge, on account of the fact that the network was looking to steer itself away from so-called traditional and hay-seated television in favor of shows that would appeal to more urban audiences. Although it's highly questionable to consider Sullivan's show a rural program, perhaps the move to can Sullivan's show was more of a call for him to be put out to pasture and enjoy what little time he had to retire on before ultimately passing away from esophageal cancer in 1974. In spite of a hasty exit from the screen after 23 years of service to the network, CBS never forgot how beneficial the show was to their success. Naturally, once the show ended and nostalgia reared its lucrative head, various specials would hit the network over the next few decades, and even in syndication. Which brings us to another player in this story, longtime TV and film documentary producer Andrew Sult, whose Sofa Entertainment acquired lock, stock, and barrel the rights to Sullivan's shows in the 90s. Or to hear him put it in a 1992 interview,
it was the highest production value show for its day, and it captured these great artists in their prime. And when you see it today, it's sometimes better than you even remember it. What's remarkable is he stayed on the air without really being able to sing, dance, or tell a joke. But he knew how to present a show. America trusted his taste, and he put on an incredible show 50 weeks a year for 23 years. We hope to have the Sullivan Show as an hour a week in local television markets.
It was thanks to Sult's acquisition of the Sullivan archives that, even to this day, the show remains a staple of the rerun circuit and a reminder of just how much of a talent showcase it was in those bygone years. If only there was a way to harness some of that reverie for a modern-day audience. Fast forward back to the year 1998 and the stark reality that absolutely nobody was looking for a variety show in prime time. In fact, if you listen to our episode about 1980's Pink Lady and Jeff,
Episode 20,
you might understand why TV networks didn't want to hear the words variety and show put back to back in their presence ever again. But to be completely fair, variety shows never truly died after 1980. They just became less and less commonplace and more redefined over the years. Just ask anybody nominated for an Emmy Award in the so-called variety categories in recent years if you doubt the claim. But aside from audience taste, there was one other reason why there was interest in recapturing the magic of The Sullivan Show for a modern audience. For it was 1998 that marked the show's 50th anniversary. And while its home network of CBS would pull out all the stops with a 50th anniversary retrospective clip show to help dwell on the past and pull in ratings from aging baby boomer demographics, one other network had its eyes on the future.
UPN, the United Paramount Network, coming January 16th. Look for it.
You thought you'd be hearing the last of them around here, didn't you? But yes, our old frenemy, the UPN network, is a key player in this story. Lost in the throes of the network still trying to find its own identity in its early years between urban comedy, sci-fi action, and one unfortunate melding of the two,
Episode 74,
UPN spent 1998 here bent on a singular mission: to be a network that can achieve success by doing more than just what already worked. The first step in that approach was to hire an executive to not only run the network, but steer it onto a proper course. Somebody who, conveniently enough, we already met 2 years earlier.
But the TV business, I have no desire to be remembered or forgotten or either. It was just, like I said, it was part of the gig, and it was great fun, and I'm really pleased. But if I never have my name inscribed anywhere in the TV business, or I never get to have any conversation with anybody again, I won't miss it. On the other hand, I'll always watch television, and I'll always be glad to have that box in my home.
We sorta dipped our toes in the water a few times when discussing the efforts of one Dean Valentine, a former Disney executive who, in spite of the successes he would have there, tried to redefine the UPN network while it was already in the middle of finding its own audience. The short version was that, while he was aware of the numbers UPN was pulling in among urban audiences, he felt it was too niche of a crowd to ever make the network into a full-fledged contender. In short, he wanted to put the broad back in broadcasting for the network. In doing so, his first year of programming for UPN featured shows that would appeal to a much wider audience, as well as one show that would appeal to absolutely no one.
The Secret Diary of Desmond Pfeiffer, the P isn't silent, chronicles the life and times of a member of President Lincoln's staff at the height of the Civil War.
Soon, demons. Much sooner than you think. When he was hired by Viacom to become the UPN network's next CEO in 1997, Valentine was eager to put the broad and broadcasting theory to the test by greenlighting shows that would appeal to so-called flyover country in the United States. largely through a number of revivals, well-known stars that the networks could afford, and existing properties with brand name recognition. But before any of those would launch, Valentine wanted to test the waters with UPN's existing audience by putting on a variety show that was akin to the good old days of Ed Sullivan, complete with comedians, novelty acts, and other performers that would have broad appeal. Considering UPN kept flipping back and forth between 5th and 6th place, there was a sense of, what do we have to lose? So naturally, the powers that be at UPN decided to greenlight a pilot for this potential variety show that would be a tribute to Ed Sullivan. Now all that was needed was a master of ceremonies similar to Ed Sullivan who would introduce the acts. To which Dean Valentine thought to himself, why don't we just get Ed Sullivan?
I keep telling you, he's 73 years old and he's dead.
Or so one would think. Yes, the real Sullivan shed his mortal coil a long time ago, but that doesn't mean he couldn't be brought back from the dead in one way, shape, or form. Nor did it stop similarly deceased stars of yesteryear from doing the same.
Amazing Dirt Devil broom vac sweeps and picks up dirt in one easy motion.
We mentioned this a little while ago in our second Big Game Hall of Shame, episode 60, when discussing the Dirt Devil vacuum commercial of 1997, where they digitally inserted said vacuum into the hands of Fred Astaire while doing one of his famous dance routines, and how it sort of kicked off the trend of advertisers willing to shell out money to use a famous person's likeness in advertising, especially if that person happens to be permanently immobile. To recap, I honestly have nothing against this practice as long as it's all cool with the estate of the deceased, for as we all know, there could be a relative of the family who's hard up for cash, and this might have been the easiest way to obtain it. As long as the portrayal is done in a dignified way, I see no harm. And thankfully, neither did both Andrew Solt and the estate of Ed Sullivan, who soon realized the same thing. Just as they did for a 1997 commercial for Mercedes-Benz that utilized vintage footage of Sullivan introducing acts, but his voice being dubbed by someone else, also authorized by the estate.
Headlining tonight's really big show, here's the Mercedes-Benz M-Class right there.
So at the very least, there was a template in place for there to be a new Ed Sullivan show without his remains actually being present or exhumed. Now all that was needed was somebody to fill his shoes and poor posture. Luckily, Sullivan's mannerisms were so imitatable that they were impersonated by some of the best mimics in the business.
Right here on our show. Just after Connie Francis, her tribute to Carmen Basilio. And immediately following, or just following, the waltzing mice.
It was the impersonator George Carlin was impersonating, while doing an impression, who would have the honor of bringing Ed Sullivan back from the dead, John Biner.
Anyone in the audience know the rest of that song? The animals? Any of the animals know the rest of that? You want to keep it down? Come on, keep it down.
One of the great journeymen of comedy who would do practically everything in his career of over 60 years and, as of this recording, still counting. From impressions of Sullivan, John Wayne, Dean Martin, and other people that you should ask your great-grandparents about, to TV guest star on shows like Get Smart, Hawaii Five-0, and The Odd Couple, among others. To his own show, the long-running Canadian/premium cable sketch show Bizarre, as well as far too many more credits to credit him with. So, make no mistake, Biner certainly had the pedigree to become Ed Sullivan. Hell, he did the impression of him to his face 20 times during the run of the series.
Knocked him dead at the Coper. Wait a minute, I never say Coper. It's his show. Do it right. And here he is, knocking him dead at the Copa.
That's good.
Cabana.
So now that we have the blessings of Sullivan's estate, the man who owns the rights to the Sullivan Media Library, and lined up an impressionist who impersonated the real Sullivan a long time ago, all that was left to do, aside from booking guests for the show, was to figure out just how exactly Sullivan would be brought back to life. The easy answer would be to simply duplicate what was done in the Mercedes commercial and use archival footage of Sullivan while Biner would dub in the voice. Except, they didn't do that for this show. UPN and the Sullivan people wanted to go one step beyond with technology that was around for a while in the movies, but was seldom used for television. What they would do is place Biner in a motion capture suit and have him do his Sullivan impersonation. Afterwards, computer technology would handle all the rest when, out of thin air, a new virtual version of Sullivan would be created to help introduce some of the acts as though this CGI creature was interacting normally with the performers. And with that, we have one quick biographical note about the rest of this episode. If it seems as though we're vamping things up a little bit more than usual for this one, that's because we are, and there's very little that we can do about it. For you see, this is going to be one of those subjects where we wish we were more of a visual podcast than an audio one, because coming up in the next segment are going to be several dozen moments where I guarantee that the next words that come out of my mouth should be, "I wish you could see this." So with that, I'm going to do something that I rarely do and ask you to pause this show once we hit our commercial break. And then I want you to watch this so-called virtual Ed Sullivan program on YouTube. And then come back to our show and unpause it once you do watch the show. Just type in the virtual Ed Sullivan show in the search bar at YouTube. Watch either the version with commercials or the one without, and then come back here so I can tell you why it's so much easier not to raise the dead
after the break.
For stylish clothes, everybody knows Sullivan's got it.
Want a gourmet shop? Don't make another stop.
Sullivan's got it. See our fine display. Quality in every way. When your taste is high, Sullivan's is the place to buy. Want to give a lift with a special gift? Sullivan's got it.
Buy a Wedgwood cup.
Dress your bedroom up. Sullivan's got it. Friendly people and courtesy. All we've got tops and quality. Oh yeah, Sullivan's got it all. Shopping here is lots of fun. We meet the needs of everyone. Oh yeah, Sullivan's got it all. Sullivan's.
This week on Telehell's premium content of The Damned.
No, but just to be safe, let's throw in a little extra voice modulation for an angry boss who says, "Who the fuck wrote me this way? Needy and codependent? Reduced to tears when I lose? A purple Dodge Charger? Next thing you know, my character design depicts me as having short, bleach blonde M&M hair, a goatee whose color doesn't match, and mildly sunburnt skin while wearing clothes straight out of an Urban Outfitters catalog." Well, boss then gets outraged and says, "Are ya fucking serious? Trash this show and trash it good, fuckbones."
The only way to listen to Telehell's premium content of The Damned is by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Telehell podcast. For just a few bucks a month, you can listen to our premium content and get some swag along the way. Once again, that's patreon.com/Telehell podcast. And now, back to this week's torture.
May 18th, 1998. The U.S. Department of Justice files an antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft. Titanic remains one of the most popular movies of that year and of all time, with a total box office of $527 million domestically and counting. And at 8 p.m., 7 p.m. Central, a show that I hope you already watched before unpausing the podcast because so much of this show speaks for itself. Well, that and the show's announcer, the legendary John Harlan, letting us know who's leading this star-studded array.
Tonight, from Hollywood, California, it's the virtual Ed Sullivan Show. featuring appearances by the stars of Bring Into Noise, Bring Into Fun. Comedian of the Year, Jeff Dunham with Walter. Unicycle sensation, the Red Panda Acrobat. Comedy troupe, the Burt Hirschners. From Cirque du Soleil's Mystère, the Alexis Brothers. The digital comedy of Steve Altman. Australian dance troupe, Tap Dog. Master sleight of hand artist, Ricky Jay. The Flying Karamazov Brothers. Violin virtuoso, Sarah Chang. And contortionist, Malenga.
Well, let's narrow things down. We've got a well-known Broadway show, a tap dance troupe, 2 sets of acrobats, a concert violinist, a magician, and 2 sets of comedians. And also Jeff Dunham. I feel your pain. But before that, we must feel the pain of our wannabe ringmaster and the real big show he's leading.
If you thought my old show was really big, wait till you see this extravaganza. What a great-looking audience you are out there. And it's a fine theater, too. Our first act features 2 artists from the groundbreaking Tony Award-winning show, Bring In Da Noise, Bring In Da Funk. They will perform a drum duet bringing alive the sounds of the city. So here, direct from their national tour, please welcome David Peter Chapman and Dennis J. Dove from Bring In Da Noise, Bring In Da Funk.
Well, you gotta give the primitive CGI animators credit for at least one thing. They successfully captured just how stiff and, at some times, uncomfortably cadaverous the real Ed Sullivan looked. Kinda makes you wonder if Sullivan's skeletal remains would have been a more livelier personality hosting this show. But on the plus side, at least John Biner is giving it his all with his Sullivan impression. As for the first act, there's not really much to say here except it's bring into noise, bring into funk. And they've always been known to rock the house. Of course, I would have enjoyed it better were it not for the oddly timed cutaways to virtual Ed seemingly trying to dance along with the beat, which is exactly as awkward as you think it is. Nevertheless, both Da Noise and Da Funk opened up the show just fine. So, maybe if they kept the momentum at that level for the rest of the show, maybe we can get away with the notion of digital grave robbing hosting a show. So, who's next?
He was named Outstanding Male Comedian of the Year at the American Comedy Awards. With his partner, they form America's funniest ventriloquist act.
Oh, no.
Please give a warm welcome to Jeff Dunham and Walter.
Oh, no.
Thank you, Ed. Good evening, Walter. Shut the hell up. What's wrong with you? I don't know. Couldn't find a parking place outside. Then some jerk pulls up in a brand new Mercedes, goes right in the handicapped spot. He got out of the car and there was nothing wrong with her. Don't you hate that? So I ran him over.
Okay, let's just get this out of the way. I don't know how, I don't know why, but apparently people seem to really enjoy the quote-unquote comedy stylings of one Jeff Dunham. So much so that I feel tempted to fire up the theme from Cosmos for old time's sake and ponder that fandom's existence as one of life's great mysteries. But I won't, because that would be a narrow way of thinking, and I also know that the world itself is a very large place, no matter how small it seems sometimes. So the law of averages might be a reason why he's as popular as he is. After all, what's more appealing to a broad audience than a guy who, to his own admission, and I quote, skewered whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Christians, Jews, Muslims, gays, straights, rednecks, addicts, the elderly, and his wife. As a stand-up comic, it is his job to make the majority of people laugh, and I believe that comedy is the last true form of free speech, end quote. Which, okay, that's fair, but I too have free speech rights the last time I checked. So that means I can say things like, Jeff Dunham is so funny, he should be the one with an unwatchable talk show on at 10 p.m. on Fox News. On the other hand, at least his puppet Walter is the least offensive of his repertoire. And that's saying a lot more than I could ever possibly imagine. So now we must press on with what UPN considered to be the highest standards of comedy, at least until later on in the fall of 1998.
So you don't have any health problems? Well, I don't know. The other day I got my fixident and my preparation H mixed up. Yeah, my gums don't itch anymore. But I can't get my underwear off. Walter, it sounds like you're kind of bored. Yeah, that's why I started working again. Oh, really? What kind of job? I was a school bus driver for a while. Really? Got fired, though. Why? I never would pick up any of them damn kids. Walter, you seem kind of on edge tonight. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe too much coffee. Too much coffee. Yeah, my wife and I heard that coffee is good for your sex life. And is it? No, it kept me awake through the whole thing.
And so forth and so on until we get to one of the staples of any Ed Sullivan show. The part when, once an act is complete, the act then meets up with Ed for a traditional handshake. Now, we should point out that the notion of a flesh and blood human being interacting with a cartoon character is not an unprecedented move. Walt Disney practically invented it with his pre-studio Alice cartoons. MGM polished it up with that movie where Gene Kelly danced with Jerry of Tom and Jerry fame. And Who Framed Roger Rabbit perfected the art form of art literally interacting with life. And where does Virtual Ed fit into this chain of evolution?
Come on over, Jeff. Water? Great to see you.
Oh, thanks. It's good to see you. Yeah, you're just happy to see somebody that's older than you, Ed. Walter, will you be nice? Ed is our host. Host? Hello? Have you noticed he's not human? Come on, get real.
Not human. I can do anything your friend Jeff can do.
Oh, yeah. And the IRS is there to help. Ed, you know, you're just going to have to prove it.
Okay, here goes.
Unfortunately, it's a missing link. And not the good kind. Then again, this is being made with a UPN-sized budget, and all we're left with is just how creepy Virtual Ed looks, no matter how much life John Biner tries to breathe into him. Thankfully, Dunham is the worst thing we'll see in this show in terms of acts. Just about everything else in this show is crowd-pleasing in spite of a human uncanny valley introducing things.
For 5,000 years, Chinese acrobats have dazzled the world with their skill and grace. Our next act continues that great tradition. So let's have a really big hand as they perform their amazing unicycle act. Here from San Francisco are the Red Panda Acrobats. Come on.
And they do an impressive act involving being on a tall unicycle while using one of their legs to kick ceramic bowls on top of their head and still stay balanced on the unicycle. A feat not unlike any other novelty act that appeared on the original show. One thing worth pointing out in this segment, however, on the grand finale where the lady tries to kick up 5 bowls onto her head, she accidentally drops one, but is allowed to do it again. I bring this up because during the entire run of the original show, Sullivan was always broadcast live on CBS, and thanks to Sullivan's infamous work demeanor, was always rigidly timed so that it ended exactly in 1 hour. Fast forward to 1998 and the fact that TV had become a more slicked up product by then. This Ed Sullivan show was not live, so when a mistake is made, they can cut it out and no one's the wiser. Except they leave in the mistake in this case, possibly to prove that nobody's perfect. But fear not, she eventually gets it right. And now, on with the show, and more from a less convincing-looking human being than those who appear in Dire Straits' Money for Nothing music video.
And now a special word from the Bert Firstners.
Hilly, ye cannot understand me. That's because I'm speaking the secret language. But you can learn to speak the secret language, and I can teach you. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Anybody can speak the secret language. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3.
What?
You can learn to speak the secret language in the privacy of your own home, where you exercise with the secret language videotapes, or where you commute to work.
Why am I listening to what a hard-of-hearing French-Canadian bullwinkle is saying?
With the secret language audio tapes. Anybody can speak the secret language, and it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Just listen to this. Satisfied customer. Hey, my name is Dave. In Wikipedia, I cannot understand one word this man will say it. That name, I can't.
Are these people trying to make Jeff Dunham look like the most talented person on the show tonight?
The secret language. You can learn it, and I can teach you. And it's as easy as 1, 2, 3.
That wasn't a sentence. Well, hipna hapna, yeah.
Okay, so that was a thing? Whatever it was, it's a thing that I hope doesn't happen anywhere else in the show. Now, let's focus on some actual talent.
And now, here on our stage, two brothers who perform an amazing hand and body balancing act. They currently star in Cirque du Soleil's Mystère. From Portugal, please welcome the Alexis brothers.
And once again, it's another act in acrobatics. If you've ever been to a Cirque du Soleil show or any unreasonable facsimile, you're not missing much aside from grown men learning how to fold themselves in half and also wonder what the ratio is between bones and jello in their bodies. So, let's move on.
Now, there are hundreds of comics around these days, but only one digital comedian. Please welcome the master mixer of sound effects and laughs, Steve Altman. Come on.
Okay, here's something a little more my speed. A comedian who uses audio, or rather a keyboard programmed with sound effects, to tell his jokes. How does that work?
Hi, Dad.
The audience is deaf! Yeah, Steven Spielberg and Warner Brothers Animation lawyers on lines 2 and 3.
Guy, the sound system promo!
The audience is now deaf.
But regardless.
You know what's great about strings? You can sit at home in your living room and just make up soundtracks to your life. I'm cool. I love her. I think I love her. Love her. Ah, I'm kind of hungry. You know.
Okay, I'll admit, this is kind of charming. Though, I have to wonder if certain sitcom writers were in attendance when this was happening. Something about this seems a little too familiar. I'm now being told that clip that we just played is from 1997, while this guy's shtick comes just a few months later. And, oh, wait, there's more. Oh, hold on. Here's footage of Steve Altman doing his bit as early as 1989.
So I actually wrote the love theme to all the Jaws movies. You recognize this right away. The love theme from the motion picture Jaws.
So both Tiny Toon Adventures, Friends, and Bill Murray stole the bit from him. Got it.
You bastard, John!
Please continue.
I have so much fun with this, hence I don't have a social life. Girlfriend's gone. But I've replaced her with the keyboard, see? Because the keyboard doesn't argue with you. The keyboard just tells you the things you want to hear. Things like,
you're right all the time.
See, that's all you need.
All the time.
Come on, huh?
I love you.
Wait a minute.
And while Max Headroom leaves the room in disgust, we now rejoin Virtual Ed with seemingly a virtual rat infestation.
Ed Sullivan! It's me, Max! I can't believe you're back on television! This is the greatest moment since they invented non-fat cheese!
Max, well, you must be that little fellow our producers ushered out of the theater earlier today. Aren't you under a restraining order?
Oh, you're my hero, Ed. I want to hang with you.
Will you get off my stage, Max? I'm doing a show. And now we're going to have a fun...
Did you have some work done? You look fabulous.
Now, where did you hear that?
I'm a rat, Ed. With these ears, I hear everything that goes on in this town. Everything.
I don't want gossip. I want entertainment. You want to hit the delete button? Don't worry. He's saved on the hard drive. Now...
Okay, so much to unpack there. Pun very much intended since what looks like a pack rat is involved. For whatever reason, I'm assuming as a warped homage to longtime Sullivan staple, the mouse puppet Topo Gigio.
Before I go to sleep, kiss me goodnight.
The powers that be felt it was necessary to throw in a sidekick for Virtual Ed. Only instead of something cute and cuddly like Topo Gigio, we have a creature named Max that's trying to be the love child of Louis Black and Eddie Pepitone. Because, sure, that's what a so-called broad audience is looking for in a TV show. A character with a voice as smooth as barbed-wired sandpaper. And second...
I don't want gossip. I want entertainment.
Virtual Ed may not need gossip, but the real Ed Sullivan spent his salad days as a
gossip columnist.
Why bother honoring Sullivan's legacy when you do a backhand towards the very profession that started his career? So much for legacy. As we move on to our next 3 acts that require actually seeing them, including an Australian tap dancing group known as the Tap Dogs.
Please give a big welcome to the Tap Dogs. Come on, let's hear it.
And while we're here at the Tap Dogs segment, a sidebar to this story. Very few people knew about this show's existence. Considering this aired on UPN back in the day, that kinda goes without saying. But so low rated was this program that any traces of this show's existence were practically non-existent, with the exception of a lone 2.5-minute clip that one of the Tap Dogs himself, Darren Chumley, posted to his YouTube page in 2015. Up to that point, it was the only proof that the show existed. That is to say, until this past April of 2024, when a lost media hunter known as Kev the Ripper found the complete special and posted it for the world to see. And it's only through both him and YouTube user, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Yuja Kun, who took that copy and removed the commercials, that we're even able to talk about this show today. Furthermore, Chumley also gives us a little insight as to the how and why of Biner being able to pull off the Virtual Ed setup, saying, quote, he was off stage connected to all these leads that were hooked up to the program that mimicked Ed Sullivan's movements. It was pretty cool and pretty advanced at the time, end quote. Well, agree to disagree there. It does sound pretty cool in theory, but in 1998 it was still somewhat primitive for TV audiences. At least the movies already knew how to do motion capture correctly, but they also had the budget to pull it off. Here, well, I reluctantly encourage you to watch the show either on Kev the Ripper or Yuja Kun's YouTube pages, because words alone cannot describe it. On to the next act.
Direct from his Obie Award-winning one-man show, one of the world's great sleight-of-hand artists performing in one take without camera cuts, Ricky Jay and his 52 assistants. Let's hear it.
So it looks like a magic act is next, which, again, because we're an audio show, I'm hoping you've already seen on YouTube. If you're a fan of sleight of hand, I'll automatically assume your amazement. Although, one part of this piece kind of annoys me. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it's still a little noticeable. When the magician describes part of his trick right here.
And now the same effect as you might have seen it performed in a Victorian drawing room at the turn of the century. Ladies and gentlemen, I shall endeavor to illustrate and show how futile are the attempts of plebeians to enter that select circle of society known as the beau monde. And indeed to show how such entree is prevented by the polite yet frigid exclusiveness of its gentler members. Let us assume it is the occasion of a public reception, our table the hall, our deck the common herd, and we would fittingly select the four queens as representing the feminine portion of the smart set.
Jeez. And I thought I swallowed a dictionary sometimes. Anyway, Card Guy does card tricks. In fact, I've actually seen this set of card tricks on a David Copperfield special several years before this.
And that's my grandfather. He's the first person to ever teach me magic. I was about 10 years old, and he taught me a card trick with 4 aces. And the aces would appear and disappear. It was really cool. And since I was 10 years old, it took me many months to master it. After I did, I showed it to everybody, and I decided to make magic my life.
But I guess as long as John Biner and Binary Code are imitating somebody, I guess it's fair for a magician to do the same when it comes to tried and true card tricks. But again, I digress, as Virtual Ed now introduces us to...
They're America's best-known Russians. Please give a big hand to the Obie Award-winning juggling team, the Flying Karamazov Brothers.
Oh yeah, I've heard of these guys. They've been doing comedy juggling for well over 50 years now. Though I do need to correct Virtual Ed when I say that the brothers are not actually Russians, nor are they brothers, but they play them on TV and on the stage. And it's on this stage where they use their juggling skills to play musical instruments, in particular, a drum, a hi-hat cymbal, and a xylophone set. They too are entertaining, and so is our next guest.
Next up, we have a 17-year-old violin prodigy from Philadelphia, here to perform excerpts from Carmen Fantasy, the lovely and talented Sarah Chang. Come on, let's hear it.
She too is entertaining, and even manages to log some screen time with Virtual Ed.
Sarah, come on over here. You're just wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it was great having such a fine, talented young woman in our show. Now, why don't you take another bow? Go ahead.
And maybe because I have an underlying case of Stockholm Syndrome down here, but the sight of the computer-generated toast of the town is actually starting to warm up to me a little. Yeah, it's still a little unsettling to see, but perhaps because the acts have been so entertaining, save for Jeff Dunham, that even the most glaring flaw that this show has is starting to come off as a little charming. Which reminds me, I'm long overdue for an MRI on my brain. I mean, if I'm actually starting to like this shoe, something's got to be pressing down hard on my frontal lobe. Nevertheless, we've got 5 minutes left, so what else can we see?
Now, what you're about to see from our next performer is beyond description. Please join me in witnessing world-famous contortionist Malenga.
How about more people whose body must be made of 100% rubber? Basically, this guy is like those Cirque du Soleil guys from earlier, except the way he's bending around, I think he's trying to show us his digestive system from the outside. And yet, even this is a great performance. Not unlike all the other great performances that took place during the original show that bears Sullivan's name. And it's at this point where I find myself asking a question. What exactly is bad about this show? I mean, aside from the ethical question of exploiting the deceased and also Jeff Dunham, taste aside, a majority of these acts are performing their hearts out. And, dare I say, they're actually kind of crowd-pleasing. So much so that maybe UPN had the right idea for putting on a 21st century variety show. Just not by digging up the virtual bones of a personality whose time had long since passed. If you took that elephant out of the room, you'd have a pretty decent show that you wouldn't mind seeing every week. I'm sorry, something's not right here. And maybe the final 2 minutes of the show might have the answers that I need.
Now another word from the Burt Firstners.
David, Timothy's here.
Hi. So you coming to play baseball with us after dinner? I can't. My mom's making me clean my room. Oh, man. It'll be at the baseball game, Timothy.
Oh, no, not this again.
I'm speaking the secret language so my mom can't understand. It'll be at the baseball game. You can bet in it.
Not to dust off any old Seinfeld chestnuts, but...
Who are these people?
This is a great idea. See, hit the game. Beep.
Are these people supposed to be the guys who do the movie trailers on South Park?
Rob Schneider, derp.
Now, where do we keep that vacuum?
It's in the closet.
Derpity.
Even names can speak the secret language.
Derp.
Billy, my name is Mick. Official spokesperson for the secret language. Anybody can speak the secret language. Even me. The secret language is for the whole family. Daddy is freaking shit. Just kidding.
I think I said Shut up!
Whew. Thanks. Satan's something mind-numbingly stupid to balance things out. And believe it or not, that's where the show ended. Or at least that's where it ended on the video Kev the Ripper found, but there was only 90 seconds left in the runtime anyway, so I can only imagine it being nothing more than Virtual Ed thanking his guests and signing off. So let me attempt to recreate that sign-off for you right now.
I want to congratulate you. You've been a fine audience despite severe provocation. Good night.
And that's still somehow less stiff than what a few wires and lines of HTML code tried to pull off on TV. The Virtual Ed Sullivan Show, as we mentioned, aired on UPN. So it almost seems unfair to say that the show bombed hard. Then again, being ranked the number 100 TV show out of a possible 102 that week is not really doing it any favors. By sheer coincidence, another Ed Sullivan special that aired on another network just seconds after this one signed off fared far better, with the official 50th anniversary show on CBS coming in at number 25 for the week. And as if that wasn't enough Sullivan saturation, cable network VH1, which, not unlike its sister network MTV, actually aired music-related content once, put on its own special dedicated to the great music performances that took place on the show, up to and including
The Beatles!
So where does the black sheep of the Ed Sullivan specials hunch its posture in Telehell? And even more importantly, was this real big show actually bad to begin with? If you'll allow me. Well, now you know, right here on our stage, the 9 circles of hell. Let's hear it.
Limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, violence, fraud, treachery.
The special itself was intended to be a pilot for a possible series if the ratings for the show were any good. Even by UPN's microscopic standards of ratings, it failed miserably, resulting in Virtual Ed remaining in actual limbo. The sad thing about this case is that in spite of one big ethical question mark of using a dead person's likeness, no matter how crappy the computer technology was at the time, there was a good show in there. I like the juggling act. I like the violin player. I like the card tricks, the sound effects guy, the tap dogs. If I didn't have any issues with my own body, I certainly would have enjoyed Cirque du Soleil and the Contortionist, and who wouldn't like Bring Into Noise, Bring Into Funk, unless you had an aversion to loud noises. Unfortunately, with those being the good acts, that leaves us with that weird secret language comedy troupe, Bargain Basement Ratatouille, and of course, Jeff Dunham, to take away some of that goodwill, only for Virtual Ed's presence to cast an even larger shadow over the whole thing. All of that said, does that make this a bad show? Not necessarily, at least to our standards. If this were any other situation, I'd simply call this one-time attempt at modernizing the classic variety show format nothing more than an experimental piece of mediocrity that maybe would have stood a chance if there was anybody else attached to it aside from somebody who had been dead for 25, going on 50 years. Unfortunately, because nostalgia was in the air, the powers that be at UPN felt the time was right to cash in on the good name of Ed Sullivan. Not just the network, but also Andrew Salt, who achieved a nostalgic hat trick by getting 3 Sullivan specials on the air that year. And I'm sure he wound up raking in a couple of coins in the process, so we gotta tag it for some minor greed. But then you get to that ethical question of using the deceased to essentially host a show. Even with the blessings of every possible entity involved, it doesn't change the fact that it's simply the Ed Sullivan Show in name only, and that it will pale in comparison to the real thing. So we also got a docket for fraud, as well as heresy, because, let's face it, as much as there was only one Ed Sullivan, there was also only one Ed Sullivan Show. And both him and a show of that caliber will likely never make its way onto a television screen ever again. Even if they perfect all the technology there is to the nth degree in order to pull it off, it's just not possible. I hope. The virtual Ed Sullivan Show earns 4 out of 9 circles of Telehell. But like I said earlier, just because the variety show format in the most classic of sense has been dead for years, it doesn't mean that variety entertainment in general has gone away. As much as I hate to admit it, the reality TV format has actually done more than enough to carry the mantle left behind from previous decades, especially through the myriad of talent competition shows on the air currently. You can't fault them for wanting to seek out new talent, because Sullivan's show led the way. You see a new talent either in music, comedy, or other stagecrafts making their debut on a late-night talk show? You've got Ed to thank for that too. And although his show was the place where established talent can take advantage of a mammoth weekly audience, Sullivan, I feel, doesn't get nearly enough credit for practically pioneering the idea that anybody can be a star on that stage, up to and including the man himself. Or to hear one of his more frequent guests in the later years of the show say in his own words,
"Well, it's over now. No one got a chance to thank Ed either. You dig that? The last one that they taped, they didn't know it was going to be the last one because they were due to go into reruns the next week, and then it was canceled after it was in reruns. So at the actual last show after 23 years, nobody really, knew the vibes they were into. What a shame. I would like to have been there just to say, thanks, Ed! No kidding, man. Thanks for all them crazy acts and everything in all those years. Wow. Thanks for the Beatles, Ed. Ed made sure we got him, man. And Elvis, yeah. Little maudlin gang, but thanks, Ed. Da-da-da.
Next time on Telehell, the Rex of '98 continues. And if you thought reboots, remakes, and rehashes are a plague in the 21st century, you're living in a fantasy world.
Welcome to Fantasy Island.
TV2 presents the brand new series of the long-running international hit show.
When one removes such an important influence on one's life, there are bound to be changes.
An old favorite with a brand new twist.
Amazing, isn't it?
Fantasy Island, starring Malcolm McDowell as Mr. Rourke.
Until then,
if it's not in Telehell, it's not worth a damn.
Telehell was written, produced, edited, and narrated by me, Justin Hart. All clips used in this program are protected under the Fair Use Doctrine of the U.S. Copyright Act of 1976, and all clips used come courtesy of their respective companies and owners. Some of the music used in this program comes courtesy of YouTube and their audio library service. Telehell is a production of Horton Road and is distributed by Libsyn. You know that thing that people do in order to communicate with each other without actually having to look each other face to face? Social media? Well, we do that. Look for us on X, Facebook, and now Blue Sky. All 3 of them at Telehell Podcast. And don't forget to like, comment, rate, subscribe, and pretty much tell us what you think of our show everywhere that you can stream us. And also on our complaint line, telehellpodcast@gmail.com.
Another great show from Mortimer.